Generals Eisenhower and Alexander were to work together closely throughout the decisive final phase of the North African campaign.
I quickly formed a great respect and admiration for his soldierly qualities, an esteem that continued to grow throughout the remainder of the war.
For 6 weeks, the Allied advance had been stalled in the heavy mud. Reinforcements were brought up, and our battle line organized in preparation for the planned assault designed to bottle the Nazis up in Tunisia. The enemy, too, was preparing for the showdown battle. Some of the forces under the command of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, were reassigned to the north to bolster the positions of Von Arnhem there. Meantime, Rommel was fighting a strong delaying action against the British Eighth Army. Forcing Rommel's Africa Corps to retreat steadily were General Sir Bernard Montgomery's forces.
Montgomery's outstanding characteristic was his tactical ability in the prepared battle. He is careful, meticulous, and certain.
On the other side, the Nazis were being pressed back by the Allied forces which had made the landings in French North Africa 3 months earlier. In the winter of 1943, Generals Alexander and Anderson completed discussions of the details for the beginning of our new all-out drive toward Tunis in a final thrust to wipe the enemy off the African continent.
In early February, we received information that the enemy was preparing a counterattack against our lines through the pass at Fondu, expected to be more ambitious than any he had yet attempted.
The Allied intelligence about a heavy enemy attack was accurate. The Nazi forces massed their mechanized equipment, which led the advance, supported by infantry units. The last frantic German drive to keep all of North Africa from falling to the Allies was on. The Germans attacked in force, but not at the point where the Allies expected it. At Faid and at Gaza, the enemy launched a heavy two-pronged assault, with both forces converging at Kasserine, at the base of the now famous Kasserine Pass. The Allies were caught flat-footed.
During the withdrawal, the Americans fought a series of ineffective, though gallant, delaying actions on the way back toward Kasserine Pass. Several, including myself, shared responsibility for our week of reverses. Technically, our embarrassment resulted from 4 principal causes. The first, and vastly most important of these, was the inescapable conditions resulting from failure in our long-shot gamble to capture Tunis quickly. The second was faulty work by intelligence agencies. The third was the failure to comprehend clearly the capabilities of the enemy and the best measures for meeting them. The fourth was greenness.
The battle at Kasserine Pass was one of the worst setbacks the Allies had suffered so far.
As a result of the Kasserine battle, the entire American Second Corps of 4 divisions was finally concentrated in the Debessa region. In the close of the Kasserine battle, our position steadily improved. The stage was now set for the final all-out effort against the enemy position. Moreover, as a result of splendid action in Washington, an extra shipment of 5,400 trucks had been brought into the theater. This shipment immeasurably improved our transport and supply situation and had a profound effect in all later operations. Another particularly pleasing development was the steadily growing strength and efficiency of our air forces and the construction of suitable operating fields and bases.
As the final drive started, Allied superiority in the air was growing steadily. The enemy was driven to cover. The big push was on.
Just after the 1st of March, I made Patton commander of the 2nd Corps. For such a job, he had no superior in the Army. His buoyant leadership and strict insistence on discipline rapidly rejuvenated the 2nd Corps and brought it up to fighting pitch. Moreover, the troops were now fortified by battle experience and had a much higher appreciation of the value of training, discipline, and speed in action. The first move was to launch assaults calculated to drive the enemy back to the edge of the Tunisian plain. These began on April 23rd, and all along the line, satisfactory advances were made. The enemy's positions were exceedingly strong naturally and fiercely defended, and were essential to us in our final drive for victory.
The Germans were putting up a stubborn fight, but the American 2nd Corps and the British 1st Army proved too much for them. The battle for Tunis was entering its final phase. The enemy was thoroughly beaten, but continued to try to stop our rapid advance toward Tunis and complete victory, now virtually within our grasp.
Meanwhile, the British 8th Army under General Montgomery was able to continue its advance to the westward with the purpose of making junction with the right of our forces in Tunisia. It was foreseen that General Montgomery's principal battle to achieve this result would take place on the Mareth line, a defensive position along the Tunisian border in which we now expected the Axis to make a determined defense. By the night of March 20th, General Montgomery was ready to attack the Mareth line.
The British Tommies had the Nazis' Desert Fox almost at bay. Montgomery's men were eager for the kill. For 5 months, the army of the crafty Rommel had been under attack by the British 8th Army, which had zigzagged across North Africa. Now, after El Alamein, Tobruk, Benghazi, and Tripoli, the enemy was finally ground down by the wiry 8th Army Tommies.
Fire!
The Afrika Corps did not give up easily. For 9 days, the Nazis fought back doggedly before the Battle of Mareth became another notable Allied victory.
The fighting was severe, but by a brilliant and rapid switch of forces in the midst of the battle, Montgomery succeeded in outflanking and surprising the enemy and drove him precipitately to the northward.
On through Tunisia, the Allies rolled toward final triumph in Africa. It had been a tough, bloody campaign, and the taste of victory was sweet to the men who had fought for so long to achieve it. After 5 months of the most bitter fighting, early in April, the Americans of the 2nd Corps met the Tommies of Montgomery's 8th Army. Once separated by 1,200 miles, the American 2nd Corps and the British 8th Army now faced the Nazis as a single, overpowering fighting force.
At last, all our troops were connected up in one single battle line.
On each side, the troops and the commanders had looked forward to this happy meeting for many discouraging months. This was a day to be remembered. But final victory was not yet ours. The enemy was still entrenched in positions on the hills to the north and had to be gradually routed out. The job at Hill 609 fell to the Americans of the Second Corps.
Hill 609 was captured by the 34th Division to the intense satisfaction, particularly of the American High Command. This division had been denied opportunity for training to a greater degree than any other, and its capture of the formidable 609 was final proof that the American ground forces had come fully of age. From then on, the operations were of a mopping-up variety. Tunisian victory was hailed with delight throughout the Allied nation. It clearly signified to friend and foe alike that the Allies were at last upon the march. The important Allied lesson of Tunisia on the technical side was the value of training. Thorough technical, psychological, and physical training is one protection and one weapon that every nation can give to its soldiers before committing them to battle. Until world order is an accomplished fact, and universal disarmament a logical result, it will always be a crime to excuse men from the types and kinds of training that will give them a decent chance for survival in battle.
The liberation of the Tunisian towns followed the same pattern that was to be repeated over and over in the campaigns on the European continent. Patrols were still seeking out enemy soldiers among the ruins.
Some fighting continued until the 12th of May. But by the following day, except for a few stragglers, the only living Germans left in Tunisia were safely in our hands. The number of prisoners during the last week of the campaign alone reached 240,000, of which approximately 125,000 were German. Included in these captures was all that was left of the Africa Corps and a number of other cracked German and Italian units.
The German soldier in defeat presented quite a different appearance from the German soldier in victory. In World War II, the Nazi High Command early instilled an arrogance that was usually missing after their capture. Misled by the Führer's assurances that the Wehrmacht was invincible, many of the captured Nazi soldiers seemed sadly disillusioned. Their dream of world conquest that had grown to enormous proportions since September 1939 was suddenly over. Stripped of the mantle of conqueror, the Nazi soldier was ill-prepared psychologically for the role of the vanquished. These were the supermen, the elite of the master race. Their path of victory, begun so triumphantly in Berlin nearly 4 years earlier, had come to a sorry end in Tunis. Beaten and bedraggled, they wore the face of every people who have tried to conquer the world and impose their will on others. The Nazi world conquerors ended up like all the rest. Caught in the giant Allied squeeze, the Nazis were wiped right off the African continent. The victory was officially ours on May 13, 1943, and the once feared Africa Corps no longer existed.
Adolf Hitler once had a great army which was called the Africa Corps. It was commanded by General Erwin Rommel, who came to be known as the Desert Fox. Today, the brood of the fox has been utterly destroyed. Every member of that army, as well as every member of Von Arman's army that Hitler sent into Africa to support Rommel, is either dead or has been captured. This great victory stands as a monument to the perfection of cooperation among the fighting services of the Allied nations in this field. You would be proud of the way the British and French have fought here so magnificently. I know you would be proud of the way our own boys, your husbands, brothers, sons, and sweethearts, have delivered here for you.
Although busily engaged in preparations for an invasion across the Mediterranean, the Allies took time off to hold a victory parade in Tunis on May 20th, marking the end of the Axis Empire in Africa. Won in Africa, General Eisenhower departed for Malta several weeks later to begin intensive planning for the operation which would constitute our first blow against the Nazis on European soil.